Hi and welcome back to The Books Are Everywhere. So today I'm here to do my May wrap up. Honestly, forgot what month we were in. I cannot believe we are already in June. I am honestly going to make this quite a cozy video because I'm ready for bed. I'm in my pyjamas. It's getting dark. There's a candle in the background and I just thought we'd take this slowly. I also have like a cough, which I think is hay fever, that is kind of getting to my voice a little bit finally. So we're just gonna take this slow and steady. I hope you enjoy this monthly wrap up. I read 9 books, I think, in May. Haven't been the best at tracking what I've been reading recently, so I think I've read 9, but I do need to make sure that I have everything straight at some point and go through my spreadsheets, but from what I can tell, I read 9 months. I read 9 months in May. I read 9 books in May, starting with The Wolf Den by Elodie Harper, which I actually really enjoyed. This is following a selection of girls who, selection sounds weird, a group of girls, they're not like in a chocolate box, a group of girls who work in a brothel in Pompeii. And this was super interesting because I don't really like historical fiction that much, but I really enjoyed this. There was something about this book that just made me really connect to these girls and really want to know what was going on. And I just really liked learning their story. It is kind of sad, obviously they're enslaved, but you just learn how they are and you get to know them, and I really liked that. And I actually really like the setting of Pompeii, and I think it's interesting to have this Pompeii that is not about it's not about the tragedy that happened in Pompeii. It's just about Pompeii as a place and as a setting before everything that happened, which I thought was really interesting as well. And I did actually really like that setting, and this was written quite as more of a contemporary. It was written so it was quite easy to relate to, and I think that's why I loved it so much. So yeah, I did really enjoy this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I will definitely be continuing with the series. This is the first of a trilogy. I think all of it's out now. The House with the Golden Door is the second one. The third one I cannot remember the title of. I think it's the Temple of something. Temple of Fortune? I don't know, Temple of something I think, but I definitely will be picking up The House with the Golden Door at some point because I want to continue with the story and find out more about these girls. The second one I read was Under the Moon, a Catwoman Tale by Lauren Miracle, I think. Yeah, by Lauren Miracle, and it's on the top of this bookcase, so I won't be getting it down for this video, but the cover is here, and I actually really liked this one. This is a graphic novel that I like the art style of quite a lot, and also really enjoyed the story of, to be honest. It is, as you would expect, following Catwoman, but as like a teenager. She's in this troubled home with her mum and her mum's partner, and her mum's partner is abusive, and she escapes that household, and she's also finding out that she is Catwoman essentially. And it does have some difficult subjects and some hard-hitting themes which are portrayed in the images, so please check out trigger warnings if you're not sure whether to go into it or not. But I really liked it. I did really like learning more about this character when she was younger, Serena, and I thought it was a nice kind of depiction of her roots, and I found it really interesting to follow her story and like sympathetic as well, so I did really like that one too. I think I read it in an evening and I gave that one 4 out of 5 stars as well. I then read Someone Is Watching You by Tessa James Mackey, and this one was interesting. This one is following a girl who's 15, I think. She's 15 or 16, I'm pretty sure she's 15, and she ends up going into this prison, this abandoned prison, as a dare because she wants to impress her boyfriend's friends and her boyfriend. So she ends up following kind of their messages, daring her to go into this abandoned prison, which is actually where this soft play centre is, and she's visiting there with her mom and her little sister. Because she's there with her mom and her little sister ends up following her, and both her and her little sister end up trapped in this abandoned prison. It was very creepy. It was actually a lot creepier than I expected, especially for the age range that this is intended for, and this is aimed at teenagers, and that is definitely my biggest criticism of this book, is because I just didn't really feel like it was suited to that audience, and it wasn't really portrayed all that well with that audience in mind. It's quite gory and graphic in places, and I didn't really like the depictions of that. For that reason, I think I questioned a lot about this book while I was reading it, and although I fell into the plot and it was very easy and quick to read, I read it in under 24 hours, I also didn't really enjoy it all that much because I was questioning all these things and thinking about the audience so much. So I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. I liked it in some ways, but definitely has some questions that need to be answered as well. I then picked up another YA crime thriller, and this was The Lies We Tell by Katie Zhao. I would say this one has a slightly older age range because the girl in this is at college in America, so she's 18-ish, I guess. This is following Anna, who moves to this college which is not far away from her actual house and where she grew up, and she's investigating this murder that happened on the college years ago. As she's doing that, her family's rival bakery, which is down the street, ends up getting attacked, and she is like in this kind of frenemy zone with the son of the rival bakery, and they both end up getting pulled into this investigation, and she's also trying to figure out if this attack on the bakery is linked to the murder that she's investigating. Very, very interesting. Does follow some really interesting things about racism and particularly fetishization, I can never say that word, of Chinese women, which I found really interesting to read about. But yeah, it was interesting, but I feel like I don't remember that much about it, to be completely honest. I feel like I've struggled through remembering what this was about, like the particulars of everything. Definitely enjoyed it more than Someone Is Watching You. Reading these back to back obviously made me compare them a little bit, and I like that this one was more suited to the age range, and in some ways I think this was less gory, even though I would say the age range is probably older. And I also read this in like 24 hours, very quick read, very fast paced, and I think covered some more interesting themes as well. So I'm giving this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. I then read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie, so I carried on with my crime theme but went for something incredibly different and more cozy crime, and this is the 4th book in the Poirot series, if I remember rightly, so we are just kind of getting to know the character of Poirot, and the short synopsis of this says, Roger Ackroyd knew too much. He knew that the woman he loved had poisoned her brutal first husband. He suspected also that someone had been blackmailing her. Now tragically came the news that she'd taken her own life with a drug overdose, but the Evening Post brought Roger one last fatal scrap of information. Unfortunately, before he could finish the letter, he was stabbed to death. I read that to you because I feel like, again, I am honestly combining Agatha Christie books in my head and I cannot get them straight anymore unless they have a really standout story. This one is quite typically set in this closed quarters murder. It's set in this old house, and it's set like there's a locked room where he dies. It's quite typical of an Agatha Christie book, and they are kind of combining into one the more I read. But this one does have a really good ending, a really good twist at the end, which I really enjoyed reading, and the foreword in this edition covers that as well. I think we'd not really seen that before in crime fiction before Agatha Christie wrote the ending of this book, which is really fascinating, and I did really enjoy reading the forewords in this book. I think there was 2 in this edition. So yeah, I want to say 4 stars. I'm thinking more 3.5 just because I've definitely forgotten a lot of the detail, but the ending did blow me away at the time, and I do enjoy finding out more about Poirot, and I do like these cozy mysteries that are set in one space. I think they're really cool as well. I think this enclosed space just means you have it's easier to try and figure out who the murderer is because there's such a limited cast of characters, which is what I enjoy about those types of books. I then picked up Well That Was Unexpected by Jessie Q Sutanto, and this one was actually really enjoyable. This is following Charlotte, she grew up in America and she is basically dragged back to Indonesia by her mom because her mom walks in on her and her boyfriend starting to get it on, and when she moves back there she is there's this weird fake dating thing going on. Her mom accidentally sets her up with the most wealthy son, the wealthiest family's son, the wealthiest family of Indonesia's son. I feel like I'm not just like describing this very well at all. So she's grown up in the US, she goes back to Indonesia, she's set up with the wealthiest family of Indonesia's son, and he also is like set up by his family, and they end up kind of fake dating. It's a bit Crazy Rich Asians, although I've not read that or seen the movie, but that's what I've heard. I actually really liked this one. It was funny, I liked the romance, I thought it was really endearing, I liked that this was set in Indonesia. Thought that was really cool as well, and like nice to see a setting that is outside of the Western world. And yeah, my friend Sophie recommended that I pick this one up, so I thought I would for a bit of change of pace, and it was really nice, so I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I then picked up So Pretty by Ronnie Turner, which was interesting. This one is following 2 characters called Ava and Teddy, and both of them have moved to this very small town called Rye. It's a rural town, it's a seaside town. Ava's moved there with her young son to kind of escape everything and just be in a new place. Teddy has moved there and ends up working in this quite creepy antique shop, and everyone is very like skeptical of him because they're skeptical of the shop in general and the person who owns it. Their lives end up intertwining in the darkest ways, and honestly it's very creepy, and I didn't feel all that comfortable reading it. It becomes very uncomfortable, and I didn't really enjoy that side of things at all. It's got very short chapters, and I did want to find out how it was going to end and what was going to happen, so I kept reading on and finished it very quickly, but it made me very uncomfortable and has some really dark themes. So again, check the trigger warnings for this one if you want to pick it up, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. And I also read From the Embers by Ali Martinez. This one is a like suspense thriller. It's not really a thriller, but I think as it gets on, like later in the book, it becomes more of a thriller or like suspense book. But this one is following Bree and Ethan, and this is hard to explain, so bear with me. They are in a house fire. They are in a house fire with their respective partners. So Bree is there with her husband Rob, who is best friends with Ethan, and Ethan is there with his wife Jessica. So there's also like foursome of these 2 couples. And the people who survive are Ethan and Bree, so the wife of one couple, the husband of another. So it's like Ethan has accidentally rescued his best friend's wife rather than his own wife, and they end up completely stuck together in this weird kind of friendship when this house burns down and leaves them the only ones alive. It's a very strange story in that sense, but they're basically thrown together because they're the only people to come out of this tragedy. They have 3 or 4 children between them, and because Ethan is without a house, he ends up moving in with Bree, and a relationship starts. And it's just very strange. And the more you read on, the more you discover about the past relationships of Bree and Rob and of Ethan and Jessica, and it kind of weaves its way into the story. I actually enjoyed this one more than I expected to. I think it definitely did draw me in, and I wanted to know what was happening with the characters and what had happened in the past, so that was a super interesting plot. Quite fast paced. I think I read the second half in like a couple of hours, to be honest, and I want to rate this one 4 out of 5 stars. It might be a little high because it didn't blow me away, but I did really enjoy the plot. I thought it was really interesting and quite a unique story as well, to be honest. A little predictable at points though. And last but not least, I read Pandora by Susan Stokes Chapman. This is one that I wouldn't necessarily pick up myself, but I read it for a book club that I went to the other day, and we definitely had mixed thoughts and feelings around the book club. Some people loved it, some people DNF'd it, really didn't like it. I'm somewhere in the middle. I actually enjoyed this one more than I expected. I thought the writing would be incredibly dense when I went into it, but this one is following a girl, I can't remember her name, but she's the main character, and she lives in this like antique shop with her uncle. Her parents were, can't remember what the word is, but like excavators? People who try and find antiques and old things to sell. And they died in a like cave accident where a cave caved in. That sounds wrong, but I don't know how else to explain it. Cave collapsed. And her parents were killed, so she's left with her uncle, who she's not a big fan of and doesn't really get on with all that well. She wants to be a jewellery maker. it's set in London in 1799, so that's not really something that people do. Women don't really have their own kind of professions, but that's what she wants to do. And then she ends up being kind of thrown into this mystery with another guy who is writing some like papers about kind of Greek antiques, and she ends up being kind of thrown into this myth. There's some like mystery surrounding what her uncle owns and what her uncle has done in his past, and is trying to kind of hide in this antique shop that he's running, and some things come out in this relationship between her and her uncle. Definitely, as I said, found it less dense in the writing and a lot more easy to read and relatable, so I enjoyed it more than I expected because of that. I think it definitely, again, some of the details have already left my head. Felt like a lot happened in the last like 50 to 100 pages, and it was a little off balance for me in that respect. I think it could have been paced a little bit better throughout the book. So it was kind of better than I expected. I was pleasantly surprised. I also just found that heavily plot focused, so I didn't really relate to the characters all that well, and I didn't really root for them that much, even though I did like our main characters. I didn't really, root for them. And I just found that the pacing was a little off towards the end, and it was quite rushed in my opinion. So we all had different opinions at the book club, as I said, and I would read more by Susan Stokes Chapman. I think she's writing more, but Pandora was her debut. Found it interesting to read, but yeah, not amazing, so I'm going to give that one 3.5 out of 5 stars as well. And that is all the books I read in May. So yeah, an interesting month. A lot of 3.5, 4 stars, so kind of middling there. Didn't get a 5-star this month that I remember. But I did read some books that pleasantly surprised me as well, like The Wolf Den. That was definitely a pleasant surprise. Wasn't sure how I'd feel about this one, but I ended up really enjoying it. And yeah, I liked a lot of the books that I read. Words are definitely not coming out correctly tonight, but I hope you've still enjoyed this cozy wrap up, and hopefully I'll see you in another video. Bye.